Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith, and today we are talking with photographer, director, and composer Saam Gabbay. In this fascinating conversation, we talk about how his life's beginnings from a famous musical and architectural family in Iran to a fresh start in America shaped his creativity and relationship to his art. We also take a deep dive into Saam's relationship with music, his compositional style, and his experimental projects. Iranian-American polymath Saam Gabbay is a composer, film director, and award-winning photographer whose work spans advertising, immersive concerts, and indie cinema. After emigrating to the U.S. as a child, he forged a multidisciplinary career crafting spirited, human-centric stories for brands like BMW and Lego, while scoring and directing visually striking shorts such as A Postcard from Antarctica and Almost Zero. Known for melding lush imagery with emotive soundtracks, Gabbay also mentors creatives through Superpowers workshops and recently premiered his surround sound orchestral project R37 in a Los Angeles cathedral, pushing audiences to reimagine reality through art. So Saam, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Musicians versus the World.
Christine, I appreciate you for doing this for all of us. It's beautiful to be able to spend this time with you.
I agreed. I am so excited to talk about your amazing projects and how you've cultivated your life and your art. So to kind of get started with this, can you tell me a bit about your background? How did you become an artist and where did music fall into place for you?
So one of the interesting things, I'm Iranian born, and so a lot of my family story has to do with Exodus and being in exile. And I think that being an immigrant and being in exile have like a slightly different texture to them, because as an immigrant, typically the story is you're kind of like moving to a better life and it's done, electively. But being in exile is, hey, things were pretty cool, but you had to kind of escape and against your will, kind of adjust to a new reality. In our case, our property, all that stuff was kind of stolen. So my dad had to start from scratch a couple times, and that put unusual pressure on the family. What is really wildly interesting is that my father's uncle on his mom's side was Iran's preeminent classical musician. His name is Morteza
Really?
Nedavood. Yep. And his music is actually in the Library of Congress. And he's even weird and more obscure is that the Iranian Jews were sometimes kind of the group that carried Iran's musical tradition forward, because traditional Iran or Islamified Iranians were prohibited from playing secular music. It's a very interesting history to have. At the same time that in the community there was a derogatory term for being a musician at all. Like there was this kind of term called motreb, which is not necessarily derogatory, but it connotes like a maximal social status that you can achieve as someone who's a musician. And that was like baked into that word. Anyway, so weirdly, that entire side of the family got a wildly powerful musical ear, including my father, who, as an architect, ended up playing accordion for the Shah of Iran because my dad had learned by ear how to transcribe classical music to accordion, and he was prohibited by his father from pursuing music directly. And then weirdly, I was very actively dissuaded from pursuing music when we got to the States. Very actively.
Why?
Well, because having had such profound uncertainty handed to the family after, such a period of expansion, they were just, and the word motreb, kind of, that inherited that bias that there's only so far you can go as a musician. And about 2 months ago, I had like an hour and a half sit down interview with my father to kind of mine what he was thinking during that period when he noticed that I was kind of playing whatever musical instrument I could get my hands on. And I got goosebumps during that
Right.
interview from understanding the biases that he was under, and the decisions that were made when I was when I was a teen, to kind of like, let's
Hmm.
say, not make it very easy for me to pursue music. I know that was verbose, but like
Right.
that's kind of why we're here in a weird way.
Yeah, that's amazing. What an amazing story. So you were dissuaded and, that sort of thing. But was it just that the music and the creativity, you just couldn't live without it? Or was it just sort of fate that drew you back to the artistic area?
Well, I think what it did was yeah, can I just go for this? Go for it, Christine, on this one?
Yes, do it. Yeah,
Okay,
go for it.
so um
Let's hear it.
yeah, so at the same time, so what is unusual was that I don't know how my father was able to do this, but first of all, we had a Sony reel-to-reel tape deck, you know? And then,
Nice. Yeah.
for some reason, he had an unbelievable record collection. One album, which was by this guy named Patrick Moraz, who for uh, a short time was the keyboard player for the band Yes. And he was specifically on
Mhm.
on an album called Relayer. I didn't know of any of this stuff, but at the time, he had released a kind of like violently complex and incredibly ambitious anthemic album, jazz fusion album called The Story of I. And I was like 6 years old, and I was listening to The Story of I every day of my life when my dad went to school. When my dad went to work, I would put on Story of I and listen with headphones, kind of like ad infinitum. And so I was exposed through my father to what I would consider incredibly complex music as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and then into Tomita and Patrick Electronics, and then into Jean-Michel Jarre, and then fully into jazz fusion, where I didn't really hear pop music until, maybe I was like 17 years old. So I had a
Mhm.
so at the same time that I wasn't encouraged, I was exposed to this kind of goosebump
Yeah.
inducing, highly highly absorbing music, Um, so by the time we got here, as this kind of break in my psyche happened of like, you shouldn't play it, but then also it's your favorite thing on the planet. Um, I started to,
Right.
yeah, right. So I started to just uh, try to mimic those jazz fusion masters like Jean-Luc Ponty and Alan Holdsworth and whatnot. And what I would do is just kind of set up very basic sequences that I would solo over. And this is the beginning of me feeling like I was animated by some force. And usually I would solo some shapes that I had never learned because I'm not trained. I still don't know how to read or, notes or anything like that. And I would often look up and go,
Mm.
wow, thank you so much for animating me. I would, as a teen, I would look up and kind of to the universe or to God or whatever and go, wow, I
Right.
can't believe you just played me. And so it was because of that relationship that then at this stage in my life, I felt like if I didn't honor that connection, that I would literally get sick. That was a long way of answering you, but
Right.
that's the way it was.
Oh, it's an amazing answer. Well, now that you've made your life and your career out of being creative and out of doing this thing, what does your father think?
I mean, I want to answer that kind of from the standpoint of testosterone, right? Because, um, at the peak of testosterone, he would care a lot. And now, you know, um, first of all, at the R37 concert, 300 people sang him happy birthday. And I remember when
Oh.
the first time that he saw the Firebrand music video, it was, we projected it, I just screened it for mom and dad during COVID of all things, and he kind of like sank into his seat, and he was really visibly moved, and he looked at it and he goes, that is beautiful, and there was this inner pleasure in him, and I think that moment, like in a weird
Mm.
way, like cured me or something. um
Gotcha.
yeah, so
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful because he always it sounds like he has this deep love and respect for music, and I can just imagine seeing his son sharing that with him in such a beautiful way must have been a really amazing experience for the whole family, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's 90, he can still name whatever classical music piece you put on, he knows who it is. He's really very unique. mind.
Hmm.
Yeah, remarkable
Yeah,
human being,
that's incredible.
and like a kind of a renowned, especially in Iran, pretty renowned architect.
Yeah. Yeah. All of that creativity goes hand in hand. And I think in all of the math and the patterns and things, I really do think architecture, art, like you, photography, directing, cinematography, and music, they all have very similar, I don't know, I think they have kind of like a similar core to them,
Yeah,
honestly.
I wanted to speak to
So
that actually. Can I, for fun?
absolutely go for it. Let's hear it.
So when I'm editing photos, I do something that to me feels really right, which is like there's usually a curve when you do a photograph to introduce contrast to raw images, basically. So kind of when you're mixing, essentially you're mixing
Mhm.
an image, right? There's these dials, and you're
Right.
mixing the different. And for me, I realized that the way that I'm drawn to mixing music and the way that I'm drawn to mixing images is really similar. So there is this.
Yeah.
Uh, there's this particular, let's say, spectrum of shadow from the deep shadows to the medium shadows that I tend to suppress in my images. And I realize that it's like a similar bandwidth to what I suppress in bass when I mix. So, like in 250 hertz or so, like 300 hertz, I
Hmm.
usually create like a dip because I want the sub bass to stand out. And in my
Hmm.
photos, I do literally the same thing. And I only realized that like a few months ago.
Do you really? So you
Yeah.
kind of cut out the mud so that you can hear that nice crisp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
I
just
love
something
it. Oh,
about
I love
like
that so much. And I
I
love the way that you're,
go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, that there's just something about mid bass and like mid shadows that I don't like. And I suppress them in both, media.
Yeah. To be honest, I do too, actually.
So funny, right?
So I'm not as much of a photographer as you are, but when I'm mixing the music, there's something about that. Yeah. You want to like bring that down to make everything else sound a little bit crisper, a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
Um, so I really was interested in how when you were creating this music as a teenager, you were like looking to the universe and saying, thank you for playing me.
Yeah.
Um, so what does music mean for you now that you've had it a main part of your career? What does it mean to you? What is music to you now?
I'm still in the inquiry of whether I want to burden music with income. I'm really lucky that I can kind of Robin Hood from directing and photography, and Robin Hood into
Yeah.
music. Um,
Yeah.
for me, music represents my relationship with permission quite a lot. And I realize that there is a lot of like inner censorship going on for me where I don't give myself permission to do things, which is ridiculous considering how old I am and how little runway I have left. Um, I was recently at a uh, at a residency called the Diverse Intelligences Summer Institute in Scotland, where it's a group of AI doctorate, postdoctorate, cognitive scientists, biologists, so on and so forth, and about 7 artists, about 60 people altogether, that meet for these profoundly technical, deep lectures, and then these roundtables around AI, creativity, philosophy, all these kind of cross-disciplinary conversations. And one of the
Hmm.
participants there, his name was Miguel, and I realized that I just really noticed what kind of agency and privilege and autonomy mean to me. And one of the things that came out of the conference was that for me, privilege is people who have the capacity to realize their vision. Because I have so many years that I can spend in paralysis or kind of waiting from myself to give myself permission. And I
Mm.
started to realize that it's not about resources like I thought. It's a little bit of luck, and it's a little bit of people that know how to kind of realize their vision. So I guess I wanted to kind of answer it in that way, which is that so much of it is around that. And then for me, um, I am starting to get people asking me to do really unusual things after having attended R37. Like one of the things is I've been asked to create sounds for environments, which is weird because I did go to
Mhm.
architecture school for a year, uh, and I had been writing surround sound uh, a while ago. I'm come from a microtonal background, kind of these weird, unconventional tunings. I'm drawn to unusual composers like Dolores Catharino, Do you know about her?
Hmm. I actually don't, but I'm going to look her up as soon as we're done talking.
I would die if she was on your show. I mean, I would,
Really?
yeah, it's called polychromatic music, and essentially imagine a keyboard that's a
Okay.
honeycomb shape. So like there's many C's, like 10 sharps and 10 flat C's. So when she resolves chords, your entire insides are kind of moved gently one direction to or another. And I wanted to talk to you
Oh,
about that too, and about the idea of, I think that not having my music be burdened for income, it lets me kind of live in this kind of nausea state of, well, I'm so curious to make something that's not normal, but then I'm like hooked on these traditional shapes that my fingers do, and kind of try to attempt to scratch that itch of like, you know, making something unusual. Because ultimately I was infused with the spirit of the 60s and 70s, where I feel there was a
hmm.
lot of tolerance for that kind of experimentation. And then as
Right.
much as I'm desperate to like teach Spotify, how to discern like I do, I'm just really surprised by how
Right.
simplistic the algorithm is to introduce me to, this kind of crazy stuff. I know I just went full orbital on your question, but I hope it was fun, you
No,
know?
no, that is very interesting. I want to follow up on that. You were saying you wanted to go into this experimentation. Are you starting to experiment into microtonal music now as well in your own compositions?
I had already played with that a while ago. Unfortunately,
Oh, had you? Okay.
yeah, the software for it is pretty limited. Like for instance, in
Yeah, that's what I
Logic
was
Pro,
thinking. I was wondering
yeah,
about that.
in Logic Pro um, you still get 12 notes, but you can kind of like assign what each of those notes are. But in like
Right.
Ableton, you can make, your entire keyboard one octave. So you get tremendous more microtonal. And I don't use Ableton anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, so I'm curious
Mm.
about that. I'm curious about polychromatic music. And I am really honestly, and I thought one of the cool things about working with you, Christine, is to kind of get the, calling card, or like the beacon out there for anyone else that is curious about truly experimenting, and just kind of asking the universe, what is required of us as composers? What is it um, that that we need to make that's outside of our habits? That is like, what's the pull? I'm really interested in that. I read a bit of Brian Eno to try to kind of squeeze me out of my habits into this like different space of thinking.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think a lot of musicians right now are having the trouble of having their music be tied to income, like you were saying.
Yeah,
And so it is difficult. From what I can tell, a lot of the musicians that, in order to continue to do their work and to do experimentation, there is a lot of restrictions. Maybe they're working for media,
yep,
like you're saying, and they are working for a different director trying to convey their ideas. We've had some classical composers come on where they're limited to what their grant is or what their funding is.
totally.
And um, so I wonder, so it's been a little bit difficult for, I think, the people that I've talked with to have the space for that experimentation because a lot of them are just trying to put food on the table at the moment. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And I think that, it's such a tough one. So unfortunately I can't cite the festival now, but there's a experimental music festival in Europe that's in the end of April.
Mhm.
Maybe it's in The Hague. Uh, I'll send you the link when I find it. Um,
Yeah. What
Go
I'm
ahead.
seeing a lot now is like the immersive concert experience where they're using augmented
Yeah,
reality, and then a lot of, the atmospheric music, and then they'll have a live performer at the same time, and how they're all like moving around, and you can move around the space, and you're going to have a different experience depending where in the space you are.
Hmm.
Um, have you seen a lot of that in LA? I've been hearing a lot of that in other places and in London. I think there's one coming up
Well, I made
in the end
one
of the year,
for
actually.
one.
Did you
I
really?
mean, ultimately,
Well, so
R37.
you know all about it.
Well, I mean, R37 was somewhat immersive, and what I did with
Mhm.
R37, which was unusual, was that I was really curious. I really like intermission because like, you're at the Disney concert hall and there's this kind of incredible thing, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they release you into the crowd again, so you have this, let's say, sense of
Yeah.
awe. There's this like dopamine sense of awe, and then all of a sudden I'm released into like the coffee area, and so I'm
Yeah.
kind of infused with the composer is now in my body, and then I'm released
Right.
back into the crowd, and so the quality of interactions that I have with the crowd are now colored by the performance that I just saw, right? So when I made R37, I thought, well, what if I had this kind of like long intermission that had uh, um, music pieces in between. And what if I played during two of the intermissions and allowed people to come up to me while I was playing to kind of like break that, wall between me and the audience, essentially
Hmm.
kind of like children where they go into museums and they're not allowed to touch the art. And I was like, yeah, well,
Right.
if I was a kid, wouldn't I want to go right up to the instruments and what are all these blinky lights and stuff? And so it was awesome. It was awesome to be in the middle of an improvisation and then have people come and just talk to me as if nothing. And then what was also
Yeah.
difficult was to realize, because it was my concert was catered. So the other thing that was difficult was to realize that given the chance to be social, that it is incredibly sticky to pull people back out into wanting to have, kind of like be audience members. But what we had, which was really cool, was um, we had it so that during intermission and during some of the pieces, I had surround sound speakers, low latency wireless speakers that we got from Pioneer Audio, Alpha Theta, where we had the
Mhm.
sounds of like children playing in playgrounds and waves and stuff. Because I had created video for projection throughout the cathedral.
Okay.
So we had kind of immersive sound, and one idea we had was that each act would kind of hand off the music, like handing the baton to the next racer. And so there was a gospel organist, an violently talented gospel organist who started the show. And then we had ambient trumpet and modular synth. And what we had was we had the trumpet um, walk towards the organist as if it was like a wedding coming in from behind the cathedral. So the trumpeter was coming from behind the crowd in an actual surround sound, event.
Oh,
Uh,
very cool. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, his name is Stuart Cole. The gospel organist's name is Brandon Williams, and he literally plays
Mhm.
at 7 churches. He's incredibly sought after.
Mm.
And then Stuart,
Mhm.
yeah, Stuart Cole is an ambient trumpet player. He runs his trumpet through a bunch of modular synthesizers.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
That sounds really awesome. So after you went to this symposium with AI and all of that, do you feel like you're going to incorporate some AI into your next like big project? Maybe you'll do another R37, another immersive
Yeah.
um
So I've
act
written,
like not completely,
yeah,
but
it's a good question. I've written a piece that is kind of like R37 ready. So it's
mhm.
because it's really asking for that kind of surround sound. It's many, many violins. It's a bit of a hat tip
Mhm.
to Steve Reich because I was trapped in Paris during like 12 days of rain where I also was like under the weather. And so, and I
So
had
a
this like
little
I
Chopin moment
travel
there.
I travel with one of these things, they're these like super thin USB keyboards.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So so I ended up and I was having my aunt was dying of cancer basically. And all these things kind of came
Oh, I'm
together
sorry.
where I made a piece about, you know, kind of the joy of life, the ascension into chemo, um, the dissonance of that, and then like in a weird way, the resurrection, where that person's spirit lives through all of
Mhm.
us. So that piece I wrote when I was in
Yeah.
France, and that is looking like it's going to be um, very R37 friendly because it's beautiful in surround
Great.
sound already. And during that same period, I was working with a lot of the LLMs to ask them, how to kind of circumvent my obstacles because there's so many environmental obstacles that I have created that prevent me from being creative. And the LLMs told me weirdly not to use them. They what we came down, the awareness that was presented was that that there is an actual joy in making music, um, that I could use AI maybe for inspiration, but that I shouldn't use it more than 10%. And I had three AI windows open at once. I work with Claude, ChatGPT, and Grok together because they all have their own biases.
Oh, okay.
And essentially all of them
Right.
came down to this conclusion that it wouldn't serve me to use AI for creative purposes, that it would dull my sensitivities. If you can believe that they talked me out of using them.
That's that's not what I would expect.
Me too. Yeah. And I think there is something, if especially because music is, I'm not burdening it with income. This idea of um, using it as a place to really understand myself and the creative journey, like these awful,
Hmm.
awful dips that I have where I feel very rigid and more particle than wave, I call it. Um,
Makes
absolutely
sense.
stuck in the physical and not able to kind of connect to the divine. And I'm in one of them now. Uh,
Mm.
you know, I think that I'm kind of using music as a way to understand literally if I'm in the flow or not, if I'm aligned with the
That
universe.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's my litmus test of
Hmm.
knowing if I'm living or just walking dead. And right now, it's a bit of zombie. God,
It's
it's been like
okay.
the roughest
It's
period.
okay to be in different
Yeah.
phases. Well, what do you do when you're in those ruts? How do you use music? So you said you use music kind of as a litmus test to see where you are in
Yeah.
that. But how do you use music as a way to get out of that as well?
I do. And I had a really profound kind of romantic separation that one of my mentors was like, I was like, give me everything, give me ketamine, give me like all, psilocybin, Xanax, Prozac, like whatever you can. I was really devastated.
Yeah.
I'm smiling
Oh,
about
I'm
it now,
so
thankfully.
sorry.
Yeah, it was really, some of the deepest pain I'd ever felt. And my mentor was like, hey, you
No.
know what? Your body is designed to deal with this. And why don't you try doing it with nothing, including therapy? Like, don't do therapy, do nothing. And, um,
Really?
and, and so and she's like, what are you even doing at work? You should be crumpled up in a ball and crying at home. Like, what are you doing trying to live a normal life with this kind of pain? And,
Mm.
I was like, oh, interesting. It was as if someone gave me permission again to just be human, and not pretend to be as
Right.
evolved as I was. I was just some pathetic human with a broken heart. And so I went home and I flipped on the sequencer to a piece of music that I had started to write at the beginning of this breakup, and then basically, well, I don't know, wept for about a month, and began to understand how to um, intentionally channel pain through my fingertips, something that I had maybe been doing inadvertently, maybe by luck, but to intentionally take an emotion and put it through my fingers. I had never done it. And it was the beginning of me really understanding how to put my emotion into the pieces in a very intentional way. And you can really hear it
Mm.
in the Almost Zero project, because as LA was
Yeah.
burning, there was this part of me that was really numb, going, "Hey guys, okay, so you burned your house, but so what? Like I had to, I lost my whole country, my way of life. Like I understand what that feels like, but at least you're still speaking the
Mhm.
same language. We had to, I was just numb. I was like looking at all this devastation. Um, and there was a part of me that was just trying to access the pain. And it was actually through writing the music that I realized how difficult it was to lose home again. Because it turns out that some of my Iranian friends also lost their house in the fires. So when I was videotaping
Oh.
him, he's like, well, my dad's backgammon set just burned. And that's like all we had from when we left. So they
Oh.
experienced homelessness twice. And I didn't mean it from a callous place. It was from this place of general numbness, actually. But writing the
Right.
piece, I was able to exercise this idea of, being able to use my own emotion in music. And I can tell you how that unfolded if you want. But so ultimately,
Yes,
that's what I
absolutely.
learned in the
First
breakup.
off, though,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, amazing. So Almost Zero, just for context, it's a short film about the LA fires, but told from the perspective of one person who has lost their house.
Yeah.
Correct? And then and the pain that she feels, and you shot it, you edited it, and you also wrote the score for that, which is this beautiful string um piece that really just it ebbs and flows with the way that our narrator is feeling, and kind of the arc of her emotions as she's talking. The music kind of accentuates all of that.
Yeah.
Did I describe that right, or is there
You
something else
did.
you want to say
No,
about
that
that?
that is absolutely brilliant. I escaped LA because there was there was ash on my cell phone, and I was like, I got to go to the mountains. This is bad for me. And on my way back
Gotcha.
to the mountains, this friend of mine, Rana Wilson, who's a CPA, but she's also like a spiritual practitioner and mentors people in kind of spiritual awakening type stuff, and also a very
Hmm.
talented painter. And I had checked in on her because she lived in the burn zone, and now to maybe 7, 8 days later, she responds with voice notes. We have a voice note thing where we leave each other these long voice notes. Her voice note,
Hmm.
she speaks with a very unusual cadence and very poetically. That's just how she is
Hmm.
all the time. And as soon as I heard it, I felt that kind of takeover feeling. I was already exhausted, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to have to make something with this. So I called her immediately and I was like, hey, can I make something with this voice note? And she goes, sure, go do it. So as I'm driving down to back to LA from the mountains, I Googled like helicopter tour kind of places, and specifically to try to find a helicopter that would let me fly with the doors open or the door removed, so
Mm.
I'm not shooting through glass.
Right, right.
We took off, and then it just kind of developed a life of its own. Sorry, the project very much dragged me along. It developed a life of its own. And as soon as I landed on the helicopter, I called up Stephanie Lenahan, who is an unbelievably talented singer and violinist. Um, and I was like, can you come over? I have an idea. And so there was no picture yet. I just put Rana's voice, and I don't know how to write music, obviously. So she's sitting behind me. I have the synthesizer there, and I have footage, Russ, of this if you want, for B-roll, where um, I was like, okay, play this line, and then okay, now pretend that you're pulling the bow like out of cement, and then at the very last minute, just be very angry. It's like the way that I'm trying to explain to her the emotions of how to play this line. And then I was like, okay, well, this part, she's speaking really staccato, and it's this very excited way about the pieces of the pages of a book that were being flung freely into, from the fire, being kind of released into the air. So I had Stephanie drop the
Right.
bow. She would hold a chord and she would drop the bow on a chord, and it would create these like bouncing
Mm.
sounds where the chord would unfold from these various bounces. So it was just written in an hour and a half in a very intuitive way, you know.
Mm.
And then I
Yeah.
would add
And it,
footage to the piece as I would be filming over the next 2, 3 days, and the piece edited itself from the middle out.
oh, how interesting. That
Yeah,
is so interesting. And so it had a very like improvisatory sort of way of just kind of growing the music was. Is that right?
literally how I work. Like in the Antarctica piece, I was able to obtain a
Yeah.
very difficult to get aerial license to fly in a very specific place which was not protected. And then on the ship, there was a kind of slightly out of tune piano. And I'm the first person awake usually, like 6 a.m. So I had this habit of going to the piano and just recording it on my iPhone. And then halfway through, just being
Yeah.
taken over with chords I'd never played before, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is going to edit with the video. And I ended up just editing the Antarctica video on the ship. So all of them, Christine, they
Well,
happen in this way.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, and you were saying in your Arctic video, in your Arctic piece,
Yep.
you worked with Sami people. Like what? Tell me that.
There is a woman named Sara Mariella. She is, I want to say that I'm almost like ashamed when I look at her eyes because there's so much wisdom in her eyes. There's so much, you
Mm.
can be nothing but authentic when you're with her because her presence
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
like requires that, you know? And
Right.
I heard her sing on the ship, and I said, "Hey, are you open to just, you know, catching something?" Because I don't know if you know this, but the Sami catch songs, yoiking is basically capturing a song. So that really
Hmm.
aligns with the way that I experience music. And I was like, "Hey, if you catch something, can I record it?" Um, and we had seen these polar bears. I was actually swimming in the Arctic when the polar bear started to come close to us, so we had to clear out of there. Uh,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
No, thank you.
So she sang, and then the next 2 days, I was just in the dining commons writing a piece of music around her voice. And then we performed it live in the ship's talent show. And then I started to then just edited video from the journey. So by the time I got off the ship, that film was done. They're just done in the moment. I
That's
basically can't
amazing.
help myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just kind of get into the flow and it just comes out of you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of getting hijacked, and I call it being taken over because that's what it feels like. And I'm very bummed out when I'm not taken over by something. Like right now, I'm pretty bummed out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there do you have a specific, like, not ritual, but do like habits or some sort of like meditation you do to get into that headspace, or is it very spontaneous, just something just
Yeah.
inspires you and it just happens?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. The honesty of it is profoundly stupid and human, which is that what's difficult about being stuck in some of these like particle spaces, like where I feel
Right.
more like flesh than being connected to the divine, is that
Of course.
I knowingly don't do the practices that I know will work. So somehow I get seduced by administrative stuff and let's call it like cleaning a room before you do study for your exam type of thing. And I
Yeah.
don't give myself permission
Yeah.
to do the things that I know repeatedly, very easily call the divine in. So in a weird way, I have like a very strong channel to getting taken over and improvisational spaces. Um, and I think there is like this bizarre thing that happens where I get locked into like a habit loop that stops me from doing the very basic thing. And then even
Hmm.
in the concert at R37, there was this kind of middle piece for the intermission that just it wouldn't come to me. So I had all my modular, semi-modular stuff on stage, and I said, okay, heck, I'm just going to wing this. And as soon as I hit one note, the following note would be revealed to me. That's how blessed I feel about, how rich my channel is to being taken over. But somehow, when I'm stuck in these very human moments, I won't even press that first note. And it's pretty pathetic. So
Yeah, when all you have to do is just start. Yeah.
yeah, so basically,
Hmm.
it's just my finger hovering over the start button, for sometimes a few weeks. And I don't know what's going on in the background that maybe it's useful. I really doubt it. But that these stuck things are really difficult.
Yeah, yeah. But that's kind of the human condition, isn't it? I think we all go through periods like that. And finding what works for you is really
Yeah.
it's one of the hardest things about being a musician for sure.
I think also that the devices do a lot in kind of prolonging these periods for
Yes.
me, to be honest.
Because there are just these instruments of distraction. And if you just don't want to put in the effort, it's so easy just to scroll on your
Yeah,
phone
it
and
doesn't let
just
the
distract
anxiety.
yourself.
Yeah, it doesn't let the anxiety build up to like unbearable limits. It kind of like creates like a tiny
Right.
valve where the anxiety is kind of dispersed in bits versus like really listening to what the anxiety wants me to do. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I
so
hear you. Yeah.
anyway, I
Well,
did
Sam,
leave it alone.
this has been this has been so amazing to talk with you. I love your fresh perspective on life and creativity. And I absolutely love what you said about your music and your creativity not being burdened by money and by income. I think it's a really beautiful thing to release yourself from that. And I think that sometimes in the musician world, they feel like, oh, if I'm not making this my main job, my main source of income, then I'm some sort of failure. But what I am hearing from you, which I think is very refreshing and actually very encouraging, is that when you take away that income pressure, then that's when some intense, real creativity happens. And so I thank you for sharing that because the projects that you've created, that you've been able to create because you've had that freedom and that permission, like you said, are just so beautiful and they're so emotional and inspiring. So I really appreciate you coming and talking with us about you and your artistic journey. It's just been such a wonderful pleasure. As we finish, what advice do you have for aspiring musicians?
I think that for aspiring musicians, it's really about humility, which is being honest about yourself. Humility doesn't mean to downplay or undershine. It means to be honest about how you were created. In my case, I had to be honest about how I was manufactured by the world, by the universe, um, and to
Mm-hmm.
know what those strengths are and what those weaknesses are. And so then the body becomes kind of two two different forms of expression. One is the physical body that's looking at other people and trying to like mimic their steps and whatnot. And then one's the kind of spiritual body that is very clear actually about what it's supposed to do. And I think for me, the flow began when I started to realize that there are portions of the world that do still run on merit, and that my physical body had to kind of produce the work, um, and trust that the design of the spiritual body was a good one. That at the right time, which is all about luck, that it's going to be recognized. So basically, it's saying that trust that the world is based on merit. Trust that if you're doing what you were created to do, that it's going to lead you somewhere. You just don't know where that where is. So you don't have control about where it's going, but it's going to go somewhere. And it
I
will be
love
the
it.
right place if you do it honestly. Is that too much?
Yeah. No, that is perfect. Beautiful, beautiful. It's such a wonderful way to wrap everything up. So, Saam Gabbay, thank you so much for being here and chatting with me. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with us.
Thank you so much, Christine, for giving a platform for people to noodle around and talk about their favorite thing. It really means a lot to me, and I'm sure to everyone else who's involved. Thank you again.
Thank you.